As Rhonda Freeman's husband ventured into the room of their adolescent daughter, Regina Krieger, on the break of dawn on February 28, 1995, he was hoping to find an intact, peaceful scene. Instead, he was greeted by a room drenched in blood and void of his 14-year-old child. The young teen's body remained elusive for an extended period. Regina Krieger was born on March 3, 1980, to Rhonda Freeman and Daniel Krieger. Regina radiated joy and had a smile that could light up a room, a circle of good friends, and a younger brother named Clifton. She had a passion for rhythmic tunes and enjoyed water skiing, making her a regular at a local youth ski club at Myrtle Lake. Aside from her interests, she was also a person of faith and was an active participant in a local youth group. But as Regina entered teenage years, her life began to take an ominous turn. In June 1994, a significant shift occurred in her life when her parents decided to part ways. This marital split was challenging for the child. Compounding the issue was the property division that the separated couple could not reach a consensus on. In September of the same year, Regina voiced her decision to stay with her father. Her mother was resistant to the idea, but the bitter disagreements over property distribution led to her settling to not complicate things further. She conceded, and Regina stayed with Daniel, her father. Although the atmosphere in her father's house was relatively peaceful initially, December 1994 marked the onset of substantial changes in Regina. Her demeanor altered dramatically, her appearances shifted, and by January 1995, she found herself intertwined with some disreputable acquaintances at Burley Middle School, where she was a ninth-grade student. Her parents detected a deviation in their daughter, but couldn't ferret out the truth from her. Their marriage progressively soured until Regina decided to sever ties with her questionable acquaintances. In response, a therapist was engaged to help Regina navigate the troubled waters arising from her parents' divorce. A bond of trust grew between them, proving to be a significant pillar of support for young Regina. Later on, she revealed to the counselor she intended to quit school. She justified it by her less-than-stellar academic performance and habitual non-attendance. Seeing the imminent threat of expulsion for exceeding allowed absences in a warning letter from the school, the decision felt inevitable. Nonetheless, Regina soon had a change of heart and projected to work on her studies, to retain her place in school. On the 27th of February 1995, she surprisingly expressed her intention to leave school and find employment. Yet, the counselor was able to persuade the faculty that the adolescent was facing challenging circumstances. This earned Regina another shot at redemption. She was granted the opportunity to attend numerous lessons, which had assessments upcoming. This chance ensured that she would accrue enough credits, thus preventing her academic year from stalling. Seizing this opportunity, Regina decided to remain in school. That very day, after a grueling day at school, she made her way home. Her household comprised her father and her brother, making their residence on the top floor, while her room was situated in the basement. That evening saw the family assemble, share a meal together, and discuss vital topics, primarily her studies, before wrapping up the evening at 11 p.m. This instance turned out to be the last time Regina was seen active. On the morning of February 28, 1995, Regina's brother Clifton looked for her when he realized her absence despite everyone else being up. Her silence towards his call led him to her room in the basement. He was met with a horrific sight, traces of blood, but no sign of Regina. Frantically, he informed their father about what he had witnessed. His father rushed downstairs to confirm his son's report and encountered an empty room, suspicious bloodstains visible on the floor. Immediately following this, he reached out to the 911 emergency service, and he also started reaching out to all individuals who were close to Regina, hoping fervently that she, in her recent rebellious phase, had found solace at one of her friends. His optimism was abruptly crushed when his theory was dismissed by all of Regina's close allies. Units of law enforcement arrived at the location expeditiously, though they weren't particularly prompt or eager in their procedural responsibilities. With minimal zeal and focus, they surveyed the crime site, collected the gore-soaked blanket, and a practice sword used for martial arts. The officers only noted an absence of signs of forced entry into the home. Thus, they speculated that the girl might have willingly departed the dwelling and potentially plotted a false assault on herself. The father rejected such surmises. Why would Regina create a pretend assault, splattering blood all around, simply to depart? The notion was without rhyme or reason. The detectives mulled over this and ultimately gave credence to the father, thus kickstarting an investigation. It's worth mentioning that human DNA analysis methods lacked precision during this era, and surveillance cameras and other advanced forensic methods had not gained extensive use. This scenario significantly curtailed the investigating officers' capacity to assess the already scarce evidence. Subsequently, inquests and questioning initiated. Naturally, the first to draw suspicion were the father and brother of the missing girl. They were subjected to a lie detector test, and both came out unscathed. However, the investigators kept the father in the suspects list, essentially due to a lack of alternatives. Both the father and the brother avowed that they had been fast asleep and hadn't noticed anything unusual during nighttime. Then it was assumed that Regina had simply vanished. The volume of blood in her quarters indicated severe injury or vigorous counteraction from Regina. At the same time, the small quantity of it didn't substantiate a fatal outcome. There were assumptions that Regina either fled or was forcibly absconded by the culprit. The latter possibility suggested that she could still be alive. However, it was speculated that Regina might have been acquainted with the miscreant and willingly let them in. This could explain the miscreant's entry into her room without forcing the entryway or smashing the window. Regina's diary proved a valuable source of information for the investigators. In its pages, she intricately narrated her experiences. A significant portion was dedicated to the split of her parents and her emotional distress because of it. The law enforcement officers discovered that Regina had a significant other named Isidro, whose existence was unknown to her family, but she had been having secret rendezvous with him. The diary portrayed Isidro as a young man of Latin American descent. Entries suggested he resided in Twin Falls and his grandparents inhabited Burley, in close proximity to the Krieger clan. Isidro was rumored to have driven a distinctive green pickup truck and had been excluded from school. The local law enforcement, upon hearing this, embarked on a quest to find this individual, to uncover more about Regina's connection with him. Yet, there was no trace of the vehicle, Isidro, his parents, or any other family members. It was consequently hypothesized that Regina, dealing with the psychological stress sparked by her parents' split, had made up this character. This might have been her way of coping with the emotional trauma that had descended upon her. Therefore, this lead was not given much weight. The Krieger family hit a proverbial brick wall. They were utterly devoid of hope, unsure of how to proceed with their quest. Notwithstanding, there was a lingering expectation that Regina would be found alive. The search party remained active. In their bid to gather any information or discover new witnesses, the family produced and dispersed around 30,000 leaflets in the local area. On the 15th of April, 1995, a severely decomposed female corpse was discovered in the nearby Snake River, about 15 kilometers from Regina's residence. Forensic experts concluded that the body was that of a young female, not exceeding 20 years. By the 17th of April, expert analysis of dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Regina Krieger. A number of stab wounds were visible on the body, including a slashed throat. The poor girl died a slow, fearsome death. This led the status of the case to change from a missing persons case to a deliberate homicide. Word of this event propagated rapidly throughout the town, eliciting immense indignation among the community. Individuals became extremely alert and careful. Twin Falls, being a compact city, the theory of a potential mass criminal infiltrating residences and harming girls initiated true horror. Residents feared leaving their homes and implemented maximum safeguarding measures. The advent of a homicidal maniac threatened every inhabitant. The head of the Krieger household was particularly concerned. His younger son, who was merely 13 years old, could be a potential victim. In spite of the elevated public focus, the investigation stayed stagnant. The law enforcement received no data pointing to any suspicious individuals or promising leads. Later, the investigators uncovered some new facts. It came to light that Regina, upon falling into a wayward group, started engaging with drug peddlers. Among them was a man by the name of Gilbert Flores Rodriguez. Detectives proposed that the trigger for the young female's demise could be tied to an unpaid drug-related financial obligation, a significant debt, or a similar issue. At the time of the inquiry, Gilbert was aged 32. He lacked official employment, but was constantly on the go between the two towns of Burley and Twin Falls, involved in the illegal dissemination of illicit substances. It was common knowledge that the man was a member of local unlawful factions. Broadly speaking, he was an exceedingly hazardous character to interact with, especially when money owed was involved. Concurrently, the narcotics that Regina was procuring were relatively pricey, making it hard to fathom the magnitude of financial obligation the young girl was under. It could amount to hundreds of dollars, a sum far too extreme for a 14-year-old. Yet, with everything considered, no direct pieces of evidence against Gilbert were present at that moment. Following this, anonymous tip-offs began flooding the police's line, pointing fingers at the illicit substance distributor for the young student's demise. But the moment officers attempted to extract an identity from the informants, the callers abruptly disconnected for fear of being uncovered. None of them desired entanglement with such a dangerous persona. The anonymous tips were devoid of specific details, leaving a gaping hole in the case against Rodriguez. Thus, the detective's perspective of Gilbert was no more than a cog in the wheel of drug-related criminal schematics. However, the interaction of a 32-year-old jobless individual dabbling in drugs with 14-year-old adolescents raised a massive red flag. The mere act of promoting narcotics amongst the underage paved the way for a grave indictment, but the key to a substantial charge required stronger proof than what was available to law enforcement officers. So, the detectives perpetuated their efforts to uncover more on Regina and her circle. In the process, one individual piqued their curiosity, Cody, another companion from her equally problematic troupe, who also procured drugs from Gilbert. Unexpectedly, on the speculated murder night, Cody was also found in the distributor's company. On interrogation, he testified that his companion was rendered unconscious in the bathtub the entire night. Although his recounts were in stark disparity, flitting from one narrative to another, it appeared that he harbored a substantial fear and was concealing a secret. His complete lack of consistency and cooperation led the police to cast doubt upon his words. Despite all this, Rodriguez still held the position of being the primary suspect in this grievous matter. Throughout the year of 1996, law enforcement continuously tracked Gilbert. He wasn't a stranger to them, having been apprehended on numerous occasions, specifically in 1991 and 1993. The authorities had an inkling that Gilbert was involved in the illicit drug business, but they could never catch him in action. Due to this, legalities prevented pinning any substantial accusations leading to his looming incarceration. A well-crafted scheme was their only way to arrest the elusive drug dealer. The police apprehended a man identified as Joe, a known associate of Gilbert. They proposed omitting certain details of Joe's previous delinquency if he would facilitate a purchase from Gilbert. This would enable the officers to arrest Gilbert while he was in the act. Joe agreed to the plan and executed a purchase worth $2,500, paving the way for Gilbert's arrest on November 18, 1996. However, the real challenge was just commencing. Gilbert was not planning on accepting his fate willingly and intended to fight for his liberty. His reputation was rife with tales of his potential misdeeds. The public questioned Gilbert's involvement in the passing of an individual named Blake Morgan Jr., and, of course, the presumed demise of the protagonist of our tale, Regina Krieger. The whispered stories about these events bore striking resemblances. Blake, too, had been attacked in the safety of his own abode while he was sleeping. The attackers made their entrance into his residence from the outdoors. Nonetheless, unlike Regina, he was not abducted. On April 10, 1996, as part of the investigation, the authorities managed to identify those responsible for Blake's demise. They discovered that it was Cody, a known affiliate and customer of Gilbert, and his half-brother. Cody had an unyielding admiration for his law-breaking relative, viewing Gilbert as an ideal figure to aspire to. Gilbert was a substantial and influential figure in his life, guiding him through life lessons intended to aid in his illegal dealings. The motive behind Blake's attack was rumored to be a dispute regarding the illicit business, even though Blake wasn't personally involved in the drug trade. The plot thickened when a woman named Angela, who was involved romantically with Gilbert at the time, stepped onto the stage. She argued that Blake had disrespected and assaulted her, prompting Gilbert to decide it was time for payback. This chain of events led Cody to aim a 9mm gun directly at Blake's head. This incident occurred on April 9, 1996, a mere fortnight before Regina's passing. The previous night, a group of ill-willed individuals, including Blake and Gilbert, encountered each other coincidentally. Upon laying eyes his foe, Gilbert unhesitatingly instructed his half-brother to rid them of their mutual adversary who had wronged Angela. Nevertheless, the antagonists chose to strategize this act of crime more meticulously, hence avoiding to confront the man openly before eyewitnesses. They opted for a night intrusion into his residence approximately at 2:30, but their plan was shortened as they found no one inside. This incident occurred the following evening after their meeting. However, around 3:30, the wrongdoers marked their return and discovered their prey asleep, unalert. Cody and a character named Jesus forced entry into the dwelling, joining forces to shoot Blake, their target, in the head. Gilbert appeared to be the principal orchestrator of the heinous atrocities, albeit, since he was indirectly involved by controlling others from a safe distance, establishing a concrete connection to him and the murders was strenuous. Subsequently, the entire triad of antagonists was apprehended and confined within prison walls. Their charges included the calculated homicide of Blake, although no one had yet linked them with Regina Krieger's case. The correlation of these instances was bewilderingly overlooked by law enforcement agents. Any evidence or testimonials delivered by unidentified individuals through phone calls were grossly disregarded by investigators. They paid no heed to the parallels drawn between the instances. The ominous narcotics merchant, awaiting his verdict confined, witnessed attempts by the Iowa Narcotics Enforcement Agency to identify the anonymous informers. During this time, Gilbert unintentionally disclosed to his fellow inmates his interest in uncovering the identities of the informants. His statement implied he had confronted 2 informers before and planned to proceed similarly with others. At last, on June 26, 1997, Rodriguez was officially given a 30-year sentence, though he secured his release a mere 10 years later. Due to inexplicable reasons, law enforcement officers halted investigations regarding Regina's pending case. Despite the various strings directing towards him with regards to her death, detectives failed to link the narcotics merchant to the case. Over years, accumulated evidence and testimonials were left untouched, gathering dust in the archives. Progress in the case was possible only through Rodriguez's partner, Cody Thompson, who had been an associate of the dealer. Thompson eventually revealed his long-held secret, leading to a significant breakthrough in the case, conclusively resolving the schoolgirl's tragic demise. In 2013, an incoming investigator opted to revisit the unresolved case. His first order of business was to scrutinize all pre-existing evidence his forerunners had collected earlier. While examining the crime scene photos, the investigator observed a bloodstain trail indicative of the casualty being pulled down the staircase and taken into the house's back area. The inability of previous police officers to spot this was confusing. Every witness was thoroughly assessed by the detective, with Cody piquing his interest as he was serving a lifetime sentence. Earlier, Cody had provided unclear accounts of the evening Regina was taken from her house. Cody, now in his 40s, had been incarcerated during his teenage years. His criminal background involved grave offenses, assault, break-ins, an intense getaway during which an officer was assaulted, and the killing of Blake. At last, after over 2 decades, a new law enforcer put together details that were ostensibly clear to others. The detective had no second thoughts that these offenders had murdered Regina, but everyone kept mum about the event. The investigator contacted one of Cody's old prison mates, a long-term convict who had been sent to jail in 2009. With nothing to lose, the cops convinced him to cooperate. His testimony facilitated the formation of a timeline of the horrendous night the 14-year-old girl was tragically assassinated. In the late hours of February 27, 1995, Regina retired to her room past 11, as did her entire family. They fell into a deep sleep, oblivious of the nightmare that was about to transpire. Meanwhile, Gilbert and Cody were roving aimlessly around the vicinity in their vehicle. Suddenly, the substance peddler recollected a job he had yet to finish and had to halt near a proximate house. Rodriguez stationed the vehicle in an alley near the Kriegers' home. Cody stayed within the vehicle, observing as his accomplice maneuvered through the shrubs, vaulted over the fence, and entered the house via the rear entrance. Thompson sat in the vehicle, observing the ongoing scene. After a while, Gilbert re-emerged. He beckoned Thompson, who exited the vehicle. The substance peddler revealed that everything had not gone as planned, leading to a mess, after which he requested Cody's assistance. Rodriguez went back into the home and soon came back to the vehicle carrying something heavy wrapped in a blood-stained blanket. The object seemed to be a human form. Cody assisted in loading the young girl's body into the trunk, yet Gilbert refused to explain the occurrence. The offenders drove off, but Gilbert soon buried the knife he used to stab the girl someplace. Subsequently, the duo ventured to a social gathering where Rodriguez mingled nonchalantly in a blood-stained shirt. Presumably, it was the assembly members who alerted the law enforcers, voicing their apprehension about him. Later, the culprits paid a visit to their communal acquaintance, where they altered their attire and cleansed the bloodstains. Then they journeyed almost 15 kilometers to a bridge spanning the Snake River. At this juncture, Cody's panic surged. Gilbert then brandished a firearm at his temple, stipulating him to discard the body into the watery abyss from the bridge. The young delinquent complied. He then retreated home, secluding himself in his chamber. Cody's night terrors and generally agitated demeanor aroused the notice of his family members. But the young man was ignorant of the identity of the corpse he had hurled into the water and had no intentions of disclosing it. The truth was, he was petrified of Rodriguez, who intimidated him with retaliation. Cody endeavored to erase the memories of that horrifying night as though it were a hallucination. Only subsequently at school did he realize that it was Regina, the missing girl from her own home who everyone had been searching for. Thompson was seized with panic, as he could realistically be deemed an accomplice to the atrocity. Therefore, he maintained his silence. The adolescent also suppressed his knowledge because Gilbert posed threats against not only him, but also his entire family. Subsequently, when the investigators interrogated Cody, he acknowledged all that his cellmate had disclosed. Due to his alliance with the police, Cody was absolved from the charges in the Regina Krieger case. However, at this point, he was already condemned to lifelong incarceration and bereft of any hope for release. On February 20, 2019, narcotics trader Gilbert Rodriguez, who was still at liberty, was detained and implicated in Regina's homicide. Yet, he declined to admit culpability. Following this, additional witnesses emerged who alleged having spotted the defendant at a social gathering on the evening of the girl's demise, dressed in blood-soaked clothes. Observers stated that he was smeared in blood, despite himself sporting no injuries. Furthermore, several individuals observed him concealing a knife in the vicinity. Furthermore, unidentified tipsters who had previously reached out voicing their doubts also reached out to the law enforcement again. In October 2021, 58-year-old Gilbert Flores Rodriguez was convicted for Regina Krieger's premeditated murder. The sentence he was awarded was life imprisonment, devoid of any possibility of parole. Even though it took 26 years to arrive at this judgment, the proclamation brought immense relief, not only to the bereaved family, but also to the entire town. Individuals across the region were delighted that the menacing lawbreaker was now imprisoned for life, thus concluding the tale of Regina Krieger's savage demise. This innocent 14-year-old, who had her existence abruptly snuffed out in February 1995, has at last attained justice, even if it took an agonizing 26 years. Gilbert Rodriguez, the heartless narcotics trader who mercilessly extinguished the life of this young maiden, will now face the rest of his existence in jail. Loved ones of Regina can now experience a bit of relief. The beast who robbed them of their daughter, sister, grandchild has at last served justice for his atrocious act.